are bringing facts back into fashion. We are making simple sanity sexy again. We are beating crazies of all stripes back into the shadows and corners and margins where they belong. We are radically rational. And as always, remember, we're not crazy.
You are.
We are so glad you're with us. Obviously, these are difficult circumstances. It is not an exaggeration to say that this is unprecedented in American history.
Oh, yeah.
It goes without saying, but we're taking the subject matter very seriously. How should we not? How could we not? But if you know anything about radically rational, you know that we don't necessarily take ourselves seriously at all. So one of the things we're trying to do is put the social back in social distancing. And we are practicing safe podcasting today. I'm in Port Aransas, Texas. My dear friend and radically rational co-host Lori Pearson is at her home in Austin, and we have other guests who are far-flung as well. We're so glad that you're with us. And Lori, as always, it's good to see you. And I'm going to ask you a question that you might not have thought I would start the show with, but I think this is so important because health is central, and part of health is mental health, and part of mental health is finding something to be happy about. What's making you happy today?
Honestly, being at home with my daughter. It's that simple. Just briefly, and this is not as much as you wanted to know, but a lot of kids don't thrive at school. School stresses them out. And so having an extended break from that stress for her has been a relief for me. Of course, they're going to start the online schooling and stuff like that, but it's just nice to have her around. It's nice to walk with her on the trail. It's nice to just see her come out of her bedroom. I just love being home with her, you know? Yeah. What about you?
We all need some normalcy for sure. We're very fortunate here in Port Aransas in that we can still get outside and not endanger ourselves or anybody else, because I can get to a position where there's no one within a football field. You should know that as we record this on Wednesday, March the 25th, we found out that Port Aransas is going to be locked down later this afternoon. We've all been kind of self-quarantined as it is, but I get a chance to talk to friends. I have found a way to talk to neighbors. We just kind of stand very far away from each other in the cul-de-sac, and we shout at each other very much like Garrett Morris used to on Saturday Night Live. Hello there, Pat, how are you? But there is still that human connection. As you know, I got to have my music. I can't live without my music, and I've got sunshine, and I've got my beautiful wife, and I got our dog, Frankie, so we're doing okay. And also, we want to thank, in the strongest, most profuse terms possible, our friends at Game Day Media, including the president of that company, John Largent in San Antonio, who has done just an amazing job in really making this all happen. So we're going to be here for an hour-ish, and these are among the things we're going to do. We're going to talk to a healthcare worker just outside of Austin who may very well have been exposed to the coronavirus, and there is some uncertainty about that right now. And the rigmarole that he went through with respect to testing is something you have to hear about. Lori has a dear friend in New York State who actually has coronavirus and has been through a tough time. We're delighted to report that she's doing better. She wants her identity protected, and of course, we're going to honor that request. As I said, we're also going to poke a little fun at ourselves and have a little fun here. We're going to introduce you to the sheep stretch. That is half sheep, half ostrich. And we're seeing a lot of sheep stretches these days. Also, a guest we're going to have, this is so nationally sensitive with respect to national security. We cannot show her on camera. We cannot disclose her identity. We can't even tell you where she is right now, but it's been our experience, mine, that anytime we mention smoking hot next door neighbor, riots ensue. We do not want civil unrest. There's enough trouble right now, and we don't want to contribute to that at all. We're going to have not one, but two logical fallacies for you, both of which are very applicable to what's going on right now. And very briefly, we're going to talk about this just as we predicted in our last episode of Radically Rational. Here comes social Darwinism right on cue. So, Lori, obviously everybody's going to react to this differently. That it goes for private citizens, it goes for officials. But with respect to our officials right now, I will accept any explanation they give me and us, except I was surprised. Okay, if you were surprised, you're either not very bright, you're not paying attention, you're not being honest, or all of the above. This should have surprised no one. This has followed the computer models to an absolute T.
Yeah. So, you know who I've been following? And let me tell you why. I've been following Governor Cuomo. And I realize we are not in New York State, even though I have my Brooklyn shirt on in support. He is the epitome of leadership. He has educated himself. He knows his audience and he cares about his people. I'm having a hard time acknowledging that some of our leaders are surprised. Do you really think they are, or are they just having to catch up with the obvious because their denial game wasn't working?
I think it was also denial. I also think it was wishful thinking, and wishful thinking is not a very sound thing to base public policy on. So we're all doing little things to try to keep ourselves together. And Lori, I want to tell you about a practice that my wonderful wife, Jo, and I have adopted. Jo, of course, who is also the producer of Radically Rational. We've gotten in the practice, starting about 4 days ago, that when we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is look at each other directly into our respective brown eyes, mine being bloodshot, however, and we tell each other, not today. And what that is that's a solemn pledge between us that it's not going to happen today. We're not going to get infected today, and we're not going to infect anybody else or endanger anybody else's health today, because all you can do is all you can do, but we're going to do all we can do, and we're not going to deviate from that, and we're not going to let our guard down.
No, you can't. And the longer this goes on and the realer it becomes via the infected or via the dying or via the hospitalized or via just the real numbers finally surfacing, I think more and more people, even the most reluctant and skeptical and young amongst us, are going to see the necessity of social distancing. And, you know, the sooner everybody gets on board, the faster the social distancing part of this will have served its purpose, you know? But there are still people they're rolling their eyes at the whole idea. So what do you do about that?
What you do is you try to combat it on the micro level as much as you can, because it's a cliche, but we are all in this together to a degree that we never have before. By the way, Frankie the Wonder Dog is now making an appearance here on Radically Rational, because we love Frankie. What a sweet soul. So we told you a little bit about what the show's about today. Let me tell you what the show is not going to be about today. This is not going to be an hour-long Bright Fest or Pitch Fest, because there is nothing to be gained. Let me just say this as a foundation for this show, and then we'll move on. The lies are a matter of record. They're facts. The lies are a matter of record, and the liars have self-identified. We will proceed with that as a backdrop, but it is no longer necessary to belabor that at all. And the other thing I'm asking everybody to do, and Laura, you'll know this, take your own medicine, Paul. This is more directed at me than anybody else. Don't let the crazies drive you crazy, because the crazies are crazy and they don't know they're crazy, and that's part of what makes them crazy. So insofar as possible, try not to let the crazies get to you, because the crazies, Lori, are crazy.
They are. It takes some fancy footwork, because the longer we all have mixed messages, the more confusing it gets, even to the most well-intentioned among us. I think it's hard to piece it apart. You know, we have to rely on cooperation from everybody, and we need to have everybody on the same page, and that includes leadership. And I think finally now, where all the information is convening and we're all starting to get fed the same facts and science and truth and numbers and math that you were talking about earlier on the Radically Rational Facebook page. And hopefully via that, we'll all be on the same page and the crazies will fade into the background. Now I'm fantasizing, but maybe they won't have a mic anymore because reason will have overcome their listeners.
The good news is I think that process has already begun.
Yeah.
So I've come up with, again, I don't know if this is an acronym actually, or just initials, but I've come up with the term BYOH, which means be your own hero. We all have to act heroically on the micro and the personal level, but we have so many groups of people who truly are acting heroically. The people who deal with us in public every day, the grocery store cashiers, because think about the exposure that they're going through. And more than anybody else, the people who are on the front lines in our healthcare system right now. And I want to bring in a guest. I want to give you a little background. The guest is joining us from his home just outside Austin. He is a very dear personal friend. He was a member of the Longhorns' last national championship football team. He since has gone on to a medical career. He is studying to become a physician's assistant, and he is studying in the University of Texas system. A little over a week ago, in doing some clinical work with patients as part of his training, he may have been exposed to the Corona-19 virus. There is a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty surrounding his condition right now, but I want to bring on to Radically Rational our good friend, Ben Campos. Ben, how are you, buddy?
Paul, Lori, good to see you all. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to see you. Now, let me just set up the basics here. I mentioned the fact that you're a physician's assistant student, and you are well on your way to achieving that status. And it was a little more than a week ago that you, as is your duty, as heroic healthcare workers do all over this country and all over the world, you were dealing with a patient who may very well have been a coronavirus sufferer. And you were not only told to, but elected to kind of self-quarantine or self-isolate or self-monitor, as they said it. As part of that process, Ben, you were tested for coronavirus, and then the fiasco began. What happened?
Well, if I could step back, because part of this fiasco, there's actually a two-part problem. The first part being the lack of protocol in healthcare providers' office. So you mentioned about my exposure. This was a patient who had come in on a Friday with flu-like symptoms, was tested for the flu and it was negative, tested for other viral respiratory panels. The panel came back negative. The chest x-ray was abnormal, so they treated her as if she had pneumonia. The medication and treatments that they gave her over the weekend did not improve her condition, and she came back into the office on a Tuesday, and her symptoms had gotten worse. And throughout this process, the clerk up front who was checking in the patient got the story and did not alert the medical assistant or the nurses to the worsening condition of this patient. The nurse who did the vital signs and the history taking did so without proper precautions and PPE, got the story and then relayed that to the healthcare provider, but did not tell them that they need to go in with any PPE or take precaution. So the provider went in without a mask or gloves or anything. And then the healthcare provider, about midway through the interview, realized that she was in some trouble here, left the patient in the room, and then proceeded to come into a conference room full of healthcare professionals and tell us the story. So one, there was a lack of protocol where I was, but I was fortunate that I was able to get my hands on a test. I'm not symptomatic, and if you listen to that story, it is a highly suspicious positive, but not a confirmed positive coronavirus patient. So by all standards that we're listening to, I should not have access or at least be allowed to take a coronavirus test. However, I did spend 8 years in this greater San Antonio and Austin area in pharmaceutical sales. I have some connections, and I used one of those connections to get a test. This was last Tuesday. They told me that it should take 72 hours to get the test results back. Well, last Tuesday, the lab where I got my test was sending test samples from the Austin, San Antonio area to a lab in California. This is about the time where California was becoming an epicenter for coronavirus in the United States. And my test has not been lost because I've called the lab and they know that it's in California. It just hasn't been processed yet. So this was yesterday that I called the lab. My original test sample has still not been tested, and that was a week ago. So when I asked how long I should wait until my test results, the lab frankly told me it would be quicker if you got another test, because we're now sending those lab results to a lab in Dallas, and it's more likely that you'll get that lab result back before your original one that's still in California.
Oh my God.
So lack of protocol in individual offices, and the lack of standardization and the amount of availability and the ease of testing. And those are really why I think those are two pillars of public health that is failing us right now, and why we're seeing an uptick. And to be honest, because we're not testing, we just really don't know how bad it is. Who are the carriers? My risk is low, but it's not zero.
Right.
I am asymptomatic. I have no symptoms, but I'm still in my self-quarantine now, going on day 8.
Ben, you have a wonderful wife. You have a beautiful, beautiful baby boy. How stressful is this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say about my household, I feel like I live with heroes. My wife works for the Department of Public Safety in the state. So I've seen her work through Hurricane Harvey, and now I see her work from home here, and all the planning that's going through the state behind the scenes. She's really one of those unsung heroes. Also, I have a stepdaughter with me who works in the restaurant industry, and she has gone from being a hostess to somebody who's making to-go orders and now delivering food to people here in the greater Austin area. And she comes home exhausted, and I tell her, you know, you might not believe it, but there's people that are depending on you for their food. Absolutely. And you are one of those unsung heroes, like many others, pulling together. So I'll just preface that, your question with that. Yes, there is a baseline of stress. Like you mentioned, I have a almost 8-month-old, and it's hard to tell if his cough that he's having right now is just allergies, or he's just not doing well with the bottle, or his new eating habits, or if, in the back of my mind I'm thinking, does this kid have it? Now we're checking his temperatures, we're doing system checks with him as well. So if I told you that I wasn't stressed out, or that was in the back of my mind, that would be a lie. And so it's there. However, again, the school that I'm with gave me a symptom tracker. I've been aggressively tracking my symptoms and temperature. We're doing that with our son as well. So again, what's the likelihood? Zero, low. Is it zero? No.
Right.
Ben, I want to ask you this, and I'm not putting words in your mouth. I wouldn't do this. But on the macro level, among healthcare workers, is there a feeling right now of who's running this train?
Lori had talked about Governor Cuomo, and I've been following him as well. Something that amazes me as somebody that's going through medical training, how flippantly we refer to ventilators and the ventilator shortage. This isn't an oxygen mask. Ventilators aren't the little strip that goes around your nose and helps you with oxygen. It's almost the last. If we called it an iron lung, maybe people would refer or act around that phrase a little differently. To tell you the seriousness, when we're talking about needing tens of thousands of these machines that breathe for people when they are unable to breathe on their own. Whether you're unable to get oxygen in or get carbon dioxide out, that is the job of the ventilator. It is almost a last resort in the medical field, and we're referring to them as if they're like these masks or gowns or gloves that we just need more of. Each ventilator needed can only support one person, and there's only one way. There are 2 ways that person gets off the ventilator. They either start breathing on their own normally, or they pass away. And we would just refer to them as if this is just another type of random piece of equipment in the medical field. No, when you hear ventilators, that's very much the end of the road for some of these patients, and we are in desperate shortage. So our governors are doing a great job. I watched the press conference from Governor Abbott. I stood up and gave him a standing ovation when he said that he would defer to the medical experts. It makes me feel like, as a citizen of the state of Texas, our leaders are looking to the appropriate people in medicine to guide us through this. And that does give me some hope, because those are exactly the type of professionals and leaders we should be listening to.
Ben, thank you so much, brother. You're such a dear friend, and all love and support to Casey and to little Javi. I know you're going to keep us updated. Thank you for doing what you do for our populace and public health, and that goes to all of our wonderful public health care workers who are fighting this fight on the front line. Ben Campos, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lori. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori, before we get to our next guest, I want to address this with you very quickly, if I can. I'm really not a big government guy necessarily, but there are certain functions that only the federal government can perform. One of those, of course, is national defense, but the other one would be coordination of national health initiatives. That is the proper function of the federal government. And we have a situation right now. We have states competing against the feds and states having to compete against other states. That is abdication.
I'm sorry, that is what? You cut out just.
That's abdication of duty.
Yeah, I agree. But I think we're all too far down the line to correct what's gone wrong in that process, unless there's just a big change.
Are we really? Because right now we're talking about distribution problems.
I'm not
and you know, we're told that the federal government is not a delivery system. Well, actually, right now it properly should be.
It should be, but I'm saying the system's already in place. Can they be unified at a government level to help us all as a country? Because, you know, like, as Ben said, we've got state governors and other more local affiliates and people in charge making decisions and calls. And yeah, I get it. We're all in competition with each other. But as a country, we do have epicenters. There are a couple, one of which we're going to talk to somebody from, where the problem is a lot bigger than it is in Austin for now. But we're going to see a lot more of these epicenters popping up. So then I think you're right. You know, the national take on it would feel a little better if we were watching it all be spread where it needs to go instead of all just being in competition with each other. But
there was no plan. There was no plan. And of everything that I will listen to and everything I will countenance and consider, this idea is we got caught by surprise is not one of them. It shouldn't be. Let's get right to our next guest, the one that Lori just referenced. Lori has, just as I have a dear friend in Ben Campos, Lori has a dear friend in New York State. Lori has some New York ties. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But Lori has a dear friend in New York State who is a coronavirus patient. She's been through a lot. We're delighted to report that she's doing better. But it's been very, very arduous. We are delighted that she can join us. She has asked us, and we're going to honor this request. We are going to protect her identity. That's absolutely fine. But Lori, I will just refer to her as your dear friend, which then makes her my dear friend. Let's bring her on to the show. We're so grateful, and we want to make sure we keep this as stressless as we possibly can.
Yes. Hello, dear friend.
Hi there. How are you?
Oh, it's so good to hear your voice, even though it is a little coffee.
A little hoarse, yes.
Oh, all right. Well, we will try and minimize your talk time. But I do want to, how are you feeling right now?
I am okay, better than I was. I have a headache, but that is one of the symptoms. So, you know, and I've been in bed for over 10 days. So I'm not doing a whole lot, not terribly productive, but, you know,
You are being productive. You're fighting the virus.
Yes, I'm fighting the virus.
Okay.
But I'm better than I was.
So just real quick on the timeline, you are one of the people who actually knows precisely when you were infected. So how long ago was that? When were you exposed to the virus, I would say?
It was around the 9th of March. We have a friend who has tested positive. Nobody knew this at the time. My child had a play date with his child, and I went to pick my child up. And 3 days later, his wife contacted me and said, "This is crazy, but he has tested positive for the COVID virus. He really was not a candidate for a test, but it just seemed like a fluke that he got one. He went into the doctor with a slight fever on Tuesday, and the doctor said, well, I just got these COVID tests in. Even though you're not really a candidate, we'll test you for strep, we'll test you for flu, we'll test you for COVID." And sorry, the doctor called him back Thursday and said he had it, and my symptoms started the next morning. But that night I felt quite tired, the way you do sometimes when you're coming down with something. I didn't think much of it. The next day I had mild cold-like symptoms. I was a little scared, but I didn't think much of it. But just in case, because of him, I spoke to the health department, and I called there's a special COVID hotline number, which might be statewide or maybe it's countrywide, I don't know. And they told me to, stay on my own just in case. So since then, I have been living in my bedroom with my family, leaving me food at the door like a prisoner.
Oh my
gosh.
Wow.
And now my husband's mother appears to have it, and she's hospitalized. So he's with her, and my 12-year-old is taking care of me.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Just going back, I do want to know, how was your child's playmate's father, the person who you contact, you know what I'm saying, that guy?
He seems to be doing okay. He clearly was a very mild case.
Okay.
He immediately self-isolated, and he has young children, so he allows his face to be seen on occasion 6 feet away because they were very frightened. But he's been living in a different part of his home where they can't be with him. And his wife told me that he had 2 days where he had some coughing and breathlessness, but now he's feeling better again.
Okay.
And he's a little bit in the public eye here, so he's been doing appearances, shall I say, on Facebook and on the news to promote the fact that he is well and that some people are mild cases.
Okay. And for you, what was the worst, if you don't mind me asking, what the worst of your symptoms were?
Well, I would be also considered a mild case, but I was definitely worse than him. What started as a mild cold with slight breathlessness and slight coughing became more breathlessness and coughing, significant nausea and very intense headaches, a lot of fatigue. Even today, so many days later, I am still obviously staying away from my family, but I'm so tired. I took a long nap. I'll probably take another one. I do have somewhat of an appetite back, but I lost that completely. I know I read that people are losing sense of smell and taste.
Yes.
Well, I had no interest in food, but I couldn't say that I lost sense of smell and taste. I just didn't want it. So it's hard to say that, those senses were gone. But when you're feeling very tired and achy also, like you have a flu, you don't want anything. So some of that has reversed, but I'm still not finished with this, obviously.
No, first of all, I really appreciate you coming on today to talk about this in the midst of feeling so craptastic. But it's extremely important because it's so sobering to find out you are a mild case and you haven't left your bed in 10 days and you're a mild case. You know,
Exactly.
that's scary. And you are a relatively youthful person, and definitely a healthy person, a health conscious person. Did you have any pre-existing conditions? Sorry to be nosy, but like just.
It's okay. Fortunately, I did not.
Well, good. See, that's my point. Is you've got a healthy person who has a full-time job and is going about her business and, you know, picking up a child from a play date and now 10 days in bed. I mean, that's very, very sobering. And
Yes. I'd also like to mention that, you know, everybody on the news is talking about shortness of breath and high fever, but this is a clear, you know, those are definitive symptoms, no doubt, but not everybody is in that position. My fever has never gone above 100.2. And in fact, that was only one day. Most of this illness, it has been 0.99.
wow. Okay.
And my mother-in-law, who's currently hospitalized, never had coughing until about the 5th or 6th day. She did not go into the hospital because she was hospitalized. When you're elderly, you get more gastrointestinal symptoms, and she just couldn't keep anything down. So she was taken to the hospital, and only once she was there and had a chest x-ray did they find out she had pneumonia. And they've told her that she will be discharged once the pneumonia is gone, whether or not she has the COVID virus, because they need the hospital beds.
Good night.
Lori's dear friend, who now is my dear friend as well, we don't want to stress you or tax you any further. Just know that everyone's thoughts and prayers are with you and your family, and with the now tens of thousands of Americans who are dealing with this.
Yes. Thank
we
you.
wish you a full and speedy recovery, and know that everybody's rock solid support is behind you. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go back and take a nap.
Okay, I will. Be safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. To say that that was a sobering interview would be an understatement for sure.
A mild case. I can't shake that.
That would be my takeaway. That was the description of a mild case in a relatively young, healthy person. All I know is that right now, telling the states that you're on your own is absolute madness. Now, the first thing you have to do in dealing with a problem is admit the problem and address the problem. So we have found this new species. It is called the sheep stritch. And the sheep stritch is a cross between a sheep and an ostrich. And Lori, you know me, I'm research driven. So I found this out. The sheep stritch was actually a mutation.
You don't say.
In reaction to a terrible accident on Bikini Atoll that involved Cold War nuclear testing. And when they finally got off of there with the mushroom clouds, they were left with the sheep stritch, which is half sheep and half ostrich. Now on the front end, you got the sheep, which, as we know, will blindly follow you anywhere. But on the back end, you have the ostrich, so anywhere now includes your own anal cavity. The sheep stritch, and it looks to me, Lori, like the sheep stritches are multiplying and they're in charge.
What are you saying, Paul?
I think the sheep stritch analogy is pretty. By the way, when we get the whole slick video version of this produced, and we'll put it on our page tomorrow, you will actually see the sheep stritch. And the sheep
have an image? Whoa.
Is a sight to behold.
You have an image of the sheep stritch?
Absolutely. Listen, facts, documentation. Of course, just like they have pictures of Yeti and stuff like that, we've got the sheep stritch, and we will put that on the video version of Radically Rational.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, there's a herd of them. It's the herd mentality.
It is, in fact, the herd mentality. Okay, so one of the things we do is we expose actual, logical, fallacies. And we normally have a logical fallacy of the week, but these are extraordinary times. So we have two logical fallacies of the week. The first one is the post hoc fallacy.
Yes.
Excuse me. What that means is that's the mistaken belief that because event A preceded event B, that event A caused event B. So it has now officially been renamed the Jenny McCarthy fallacy.
Now, Paul.
I'll move on from that, but now one that is more immediately a source of concern right now. It's called a false dichotomy or a false choice. The idea that you got to choose between one of two and only two choices, and that is the position we're now being put in. We're being asked to choose between national health and economic health, and it is in fact a false choice. There are ways that we can address both simultaneously and responsibly, and we must. Because part of being logical is prioritizing things and sequencing your thoughts. Yes, we have multiple problems. Yes, the economic problem is pressing. But here's the thing, if we don't solve the health problem, we cannot solve any of the other problems, including the economic problem. That has to be the first, and right now, almost the only priority.
Right, you cannot extricate one from the other, even if you tried. Even if you try to oversimplify, it can't be done. Now, is that a case of a logical fallacy, or is it just truly a manipulation tactic, trying to dumb it down to make us think there are only two choices when really
Absolutely. I think those are absolutely compatible. I don't think those are mutually exclusive at all. I think they're both true for sure.
Yeah.
There's something else I want to address just real briefly, and I don't want to belabor this because I actually posted a video on this page about this earlier. But I think fear gets a bad rap. And again, I'm not going to go on at length about this. Healthy fear is a good thing. And I think fear needs a new PR agent because we think fearful people are cowards. No, quite the opposite. Nothing could be further from the case. Fear is a prerequisite for courage. When somebody says they're fearless, or when I used to see the old t-shirts that said no fear, first thing I thought was no brain. Okay, if you're not fearful right now, you're not living in the real world. But that doesn't mean that you give into the fear, because where there is no fear, there can be no courage. So all I'm saying, Laurie, is we shouldn't be fearless. We should be brave.
Yes, and you cannot be brave unless you're scared.
It's just the truth. Hey, I mentioned some of your New York roots, and you and I are pretty biographically connected and familiar with each other's past. And I know that the time that you spent in New York really shaped you as a person to a large degree. You've told me that any number of times. So when you see what's going on in New York right now, does it strike you and hit you harder than it does most people?
I don't know about most people, and anybody who knows me knows this about me. My heart is equally divided between Texas and New York. And when I see those numbers, and I see this, the live cameras on EarthCam, I'll go to EarthCam and look at Times Square or Fifth Avenue, and my heart stops. I catch my breath. It's the city will be fine, but its people are not, and it's not New York without its people, and it's I can't even get my head around it. And I don't want to compare it, but the last time my heart sank for that city, truly sank, was on 9/11 with those images. And I had just moved back when that happened, and I was actually doing news when that happened, covering that event as it unfolded. And watching this is very similar, knowing that the infrastructure and the city's heart is suffering from the cases that are being reported and the problems that they're having. As Ben Campos just talked about, what it really means to be on a ventilator. You are on your last leg, and you either come off it one way or another. That's scary. And to not have enough of those life-saving measures in place, and that in New York is important because for 1,000 reasons, but in this case, it's an example of what the situation will be if we don't self-isolate, and could be if we don't self-isolate and start working as a community to stop the spread of the virus. It should be extremely sobering to see what's going on in New York, because that is a microcosm of what's going to happen to the rest of us if we're not a lot smarter and we don't have the right leaders in place making the right decisions for us as a country.
This battle is being fought on multiple fronts in the medical community. We're trying to find avenues toward treatment, a cure, a vaccine, and everybody's doing their best. Lori and I talk just about every day. And Lori, you said something to me a couple of days ago that I thought was absolutely brilliant. You do that on a pretty regular basis. But we're seeing such a wide range of outcomes here. We have people who are infected who literally probably never knew it and have cleared it already. We have people with very mild symptoms, and we know that it runs the full range to absolutely tragic. So your point was, there's a reason why the people who had good outcomes had good outcomes. It's not just a random fickle finger of fate. There's something physiologically going on there, and if we can figure out what that defense was, it may be possible to provide protection for others. And that's one of these serum antibody theories that's floating around that may actually have some promise. But you stopped me dead in my tracks with that one.
Yeah, you and I, every year, we revisit the flu vaccine debate. It's debate because you and I have made it one. But it's kind of, every year now, we can bring this one back too. I think that I always want to know, I assume the flu virus is out there every year. And now we can assume the coronavirus is just out there. There are people who come across it and are exposed to it, but don't show any symptoms. And you can't say it's because they don't have pre-existing condition. My friend in New York had no pre-existing conditions. That 12-year-old kid who just died in California had no pre-existing conditions. So you can't say, oh, it's because they had asthma. Or, because there are people with asthma who are going to be fine who've contracted it and gotten over it. So I want to see, it's not dumb luck. I want to know why the people who contract it and get better and don't have any scar tissue in their lungs, I want to know why. The people who are exposed to it but show no symptoms, I want to know. I want to know their physiology, I want to know their biology, I want to know their blood type, I want to know what they're doing, I want to know what they're not doing. And again, like you said it, I read it earlier, the powers that be are considering taking platelets from people who have overcome this virus in a most magnificent way and using that, if we can, to transfer to people who are suffering from it. Because basically what those bodies have done is come up with the antibodies really quick and fought it off and put those markers in place, and it's ready to fight again. So anyway, I just think it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Leroy, that is in fact radically rational.
Yes.
What a concept. Okay, we warned you about this earlier, and we do always want to be socially responsible. We do not want to be responsible for triggering any unrest, any marching in the street, any over-exuberance, as the Wall Street people sometimes say. So we're going to bring this guest on, but we're going to do so in a responsible way. We're not going to let you see her because we have seen what happens when people actually see her. We're also not even going to tell you where she actually is right now because that would not be responsible either. But I hope that you will join us in welcoming, for the first time to our show, Radically Rational, Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor. So Smoking, if I may be so familiar, how are you?
I am well. How the hell are you?
Doing okay. And by the way, we're not going to show your image now or ever, but I am going to hold up a silhouette of you that is on my phone right now. Joe, can you help me out with this for just a second? Because I want everybody to get the idea. So again, you will not now or ever actually see Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor on video or anywhere else, but essentially here is the silhouette of Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor. So I want to thank you for watering your flowers and everybody else's. I want to encourage you to never, ever turn the light out, okay?
I was going to say, you know, it was awfully hard to hold still when I was trying to water the daisies and them to capture that image.
Well, the daisies are growing, and they're very grateful for that. So Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor, what about this obviously we're all in sympathy with people around the world. We're never, ever making light of this. I want to make that clear, but we got to have some humor here to keep ourselves sane to a degree. So what's one of the peripheral things here that's on your mind?
Oh, goodness. I want to talk about this toilet paper. What the hell? I couldn't believe it. I absolutely could not believe it. I'm watching the news, and this, this seriousness of what's going on is hitting me, and I'm kind of in a depressed state. And then I see people with toilet paper running over in their baskets. And I kept thinking, I have got 1,000 things around my house that I can use if I run out of toilet paper.
Like?
Let's say my kids are walking around with mismatched socks right now.
And then the one you can never find in the dryer.
Yeah.
My socks are fine. See, if y'all could see me right now, you would see that my socks match. My children's, however, they don't.
Well, they're little and they fit on your hand, so that's better.
So, smoking out next door neighbor and Lori, let me ask you this. We always have these reflex things that we do, and they don't make any sense. So hoarding toilet paper right now, I would liken it to this. Remember on every Western movie you ever saw and every episode of Gunsmoke, including Doc, if a woman was having a baby, people would start saying, we got to go boil some water and tear some sheets up and turn them into bandages. And we go, what the heck? I think hoarding toilet paper is exactly the same reflex and reaction.
Yeah, reflexivity. Yeah.
Boil the water. Yes. Now, Paul, I have to address the fact that the whole boiling the water was simply to keep the person busy because they were annoying everyone else.
Get out of here. I'll mark it.
All right.
Yeah. So, it was just the damnedest thing. That's all I can say. I personally, when all this, started shaking up, and I thought, as a fairly intelligent person, I probably need to get out and go get some essentials. I went and bought all the coffee I could find and all the half and half I could find. So my basket was running over. Yeah, with some decaf coffee, because the last thing I need in this time right now is caffeine. I'm wired as it is.
That's true.
So yeah, but toilet paper and water, bottled water. I couldn't figure that one out either. We're not at risk of anybody shutting off our faucets. Why? Why was there an overload of bottled water?
I think it's because every time we have a hurricane party, that's what we get. I think it's the hurricane party mentality. People think, oh, our natural resources are going to be limited to us, and we're going to be trapped inside without our basic utilities. And so they panic and get water and toilet paper.
That was the first thing I thought. I thought, people, this isn't a hurricane. This is a virus. But it's the sheep mentality. They went in for bread, and then they saw everybody buying toilet paper and water, and they were like, oh, hell, I better buy me some toilet paper and water.
Right.
So, smoking hot next door neighbor, are you safe? Is your family safe? What measures are you taking? What approach are you taking this? Because in addition to the obvious attribute of smoking hot next door neighbor, we also know you to be a very learned and responsible person. So what are you doing? What are you not doing?
I'm also a very cautious person. So I was social distancing before social distancing was cool. I was staying back, and I actually have to tell you guys, I'm loving this whole social distancing thing, because it is the excuse that I've been dying for, to not have to talk to stupid people. So these people that I want to avoid anyway, I'm like, oops, sorry, can't talk to you, got to stay back. And so, so that's what I've been doing, just kind of staying to myself. I am probably among the rare group that is actually enjoying the slower pace of life. I'm, just kind of getting back to basics, like Laurie said, spending time with the kids and, cleaning out the junk drawer and things that I always say, man, I wish I had time to do. Well, now I have time to do.
Right.
Including water the daisies, of course.
Of course.
Hey, and you know that water hose could come in quite handy if we run out of toilet paper. Just saying.
Listen, Amazon.
Always be prepared. You got to think a couple of steps ahead. So, Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor, we thank you so much for carving out some time, because under normal circumstances, we know you'd be on your coffee break during your Vogue cover shoot, or you'd be on the Riviera or something like that. So we benefit from your wisdom, and we look forward to our next visit from Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Hey, Paul, before I leave, I got to call you out on something.
Oh, well, of course. Everybody else does.
I'm a little bit disappointed that you compared the sheepstridge to the Yeti, because we know that the Yeti doesn't really exist. So it was just not an apples to apples comparison.
I stand corrected, because we have absolute corroboration and documentation on the sheepstridge. So I made an irresponsible statement, and you called me out on it, and I respect that.
Oh, it's awesome.
You guys be safe and stay healthy.
You too.
You too, Smoking.
Smoking.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
We will indeed. So, Lori, the last time we did an episode of Radically Rational, we were right at the vanguard, right at the tip of the spear of the start of this situation.
Yeah.
And we actually made some statements at the end of that episode that, unfortunately, we're not happy about this, proved to be pretty prescient and pretty accurate. And we kind of said that everything that's being brought to bear in this issue, these are all things that were the reasons Radically Rational was created in the first place. All the irrationality that we and others are trying to fight is now painfully, tragically evident in the situation that we find ourselves in right now. And the scientific and rational path out of this is the only chance we have.
Do you think it's going to work? Do you think this will be what it takes to get most people on the rational page?
Lori, I'm actually an optimist by nature, and I am seeing the tide turning. Now, you know, feeling your own life threatened, feeling your own mortality, seeing your family possibly endangered, that's going to change everybody's point of view. But I will say this, particularly over the last 5 or 6 days, I'm hearing way fewer praises. So I don't know if they took the cure or they just have the good sense to shut up, because kiddie hour is over. It is time that adults took back the steering wheel.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people recognizing their own confirmation bias. And we all have a little bit of that. You know, we all, you know, there are people, yeah, they just listen to the people who say the exact same things that they do. But then there are the rational types who are guilty of a little bit of that. And because of the amount of I think this topic itself is forcing us all to seek out as much information as possible instead of just following the ones who sound just like us, because we're looking out, because there is this threat. You can be a denier of the coronavirus only for so long, and then you're face to face with the threat of it, and you want to go educate yourself, you want to inform yourself, and you do venture out into media and other sites that you might not have ventured onto before. And I do think that's our confirmation bias is being challenged in a good way. And we're all going to make our own decisions and for our own families and what we need to do. But again, this whole social distancing thing, you can't argue with that. That is pure science. And we're seeing the ramifications of not distancing ourselves socially from others. And anyway, I think hopefully, like you said, I think it'll bring us all on the same page, and hopefully at the expense of just some social time and not more lives.
And I want to stress this, obviously. You're not engaging in any "I told you so." Are you kidding? This is the last way in the world we would have wanted our country and our fellow citizens and our fellow human beings to have maybe learned this lesson to a degree. But this is a math and science problem. It has a math and science answer, and we have to keep that in mind. And once we address that, yes, we can address the other pressing problems. I am in no way insensitive to everybody's economic distress right now. But we're just not going to be in shape to do anything about that until we become healthy as a nation again and as a globe again. So unfortunately, Lori, particularly in the last couple of days, we are starting to see social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. I was pretty sure at some point that notion was going to kick in. I'm not going to belabor this one either, but the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas, Dan Patrick,
We're not proud.
said something yesterday that was so disgusting, that was so deplorable, that was so unacceptable. I'm not going to get deep into it right now because I did earlier on an earlier video. So I am giving you the unadulterated, unfiltered version on a video that I shot earlier today. So we're not going to put it on this episode of Radically Rational, but if you want to know my full thoughts, I invite you to watch that video. I invite you to share that video. And if you agree with that point of view, let's make that video go viral. I am very tolerant of other people's points of view. I seek them out. That was beyond pale.
Yeah. Has he, there's been a tremendous amount of backlash, justifiably so, from his statement. Has he answered to that at all since he's made his, I don't even know what they were, comments about that? Has he come back and kind of made up for that at all? Tried to?
Not to my knowledge. By the way, our producer, also known as my beautiful wife, Joe, just passed me something here that I'm taking a look at, and relates to something we're going to talk about in just a minute. But, you know, one of these terms, I always am very wary of terms that just get thrown out that really have no meaning. There's no thought behind it. There's no intellect behind it. It's just something that people say reflexively. One of them is liberal. Another is conservative. We just throw these things out as if they're rebuttals. And all we do is self-identify one way or the other. And then we define everybody else who disagrees with us about anything as the other. It's precisely imprecise communication. We get absolutely nowhere. Another one of those terms is mainstream media. Now, let me tell you what mainstream media means. Mainstream media has come to mean any media source that I disagree with or makes me remotely uncomfortable. Now, think about it. If something were truly mainstream, then it would have a universal definition. If there was such a thing as the mainstream media, we would all identify what that is. But mainstream media has just become a pejorative that means any news source that makes me remotely uncomfortable. But if we're going to talk about mainstream media in a more literal sense, in terms of the way we're going to get information now and going forward, here's the thing, Lori, when you think about it, Radically Rational, what we're doing right now is now becoming, in a sense, mainstream media.
The original intended description of mainstream media.
Yeah, exactly. So all I ask is that we not talk past each other and that we use precise terms that actually advance the conversation. Yeah. So more and more outlets like this are going to be the actual mainstream media. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this either, as we know, and I want to state this up front. The president yesterday, over the last couple of days, has stopped referring to the Chinese virus. I want to tell you why I, as a person who is radically rational, objected to the term. I've heard people say it's racist, and it may or may not be, but I'm not going down that road. I'm not comfortable doing that, and I'm not sure that was the president's intent. That doesn't get him off the hook, because whether it was racist or not, and clearly it was at least a dog whistle to true racists, but whether it was or not, it was just irrelevant and inaccurate and did not do anything to help the situation and may have harmed the situation. It was scientifically inaccurate. It was medically inaccurate. And the people who go, what's the big deal? We refer to Chinese food. Well, Chinese food is not a pejorative. So I'm just going to ask people this. For anyone who thinks it's okay or insists on referring to the Chinese virus, then I'm going to insist that going forward, every time that person ever references humanity or humankind, you now have to refer to all of us as that African species, because after all, that's where we all came from. Case closed, checkmate.
Point made. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we're musical people. So all I can do is just, anthropomorphize the virus, which is what people are doing. And I'm going to treat the virus like it's a human, which is ridiculous. And I'm going to treat the virus like it's a politically partisan human, which is ridiculous. But I'm going to talk directly to the virus right now. A19, we got nothing in common. We can't dance together. We can't talk at all. We're going to win this one.
And a lot of people are incorporating that Cuervo Gold part too right now.
It couldn't hurt.
It couldn't hurt.
It couldn't hurt.
Those germs.
So, Lori Pearson,
Yes.
thank you mostly for your friendship. Thank you for your genius. We're going to keep coming back here on Radically Rational
Yes.
as frequently as we possibly can. And know this, whatever position you're coming from, wherever you are on the political spectrum, we love you, we support you, we do not consider you an enemy. You are our countrymen and women, and we want to be here for you.
Yes.
We do.
How do they get a hold of us?
Well, okay, a couple of different ways. We've got this Radically Rational Facebook page, and you can post things on there, and we will respond to them. You can also send emails to me right now at paulalexander@radicallyrational.com. We welcome all kinds of communication with you. And Lori and I are going to be much more diligent about this. We're going to be posting individual videos on this Facebook page really on a daily basis now, at least till further notice.
Yeah. Yes. And
So
it's
Lori,
not all
I'm going to
gonna be serious.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
It won't all be serious. Some of it
No,
will-
here's the thing. Once again, because I feel like you got to state it every opportunity you get, we're not ever making light of the situation, but we refuse to take ourselves too seriously.
Or
And
each
part
other.
of the way, or each other for sure. I guarantee that.
Oh,
You kid. I will say this, Lori, you are decreasing the rate at which you are dead wrong, and I'm proud of you for that.
whoa. Wait a minute. You're agreeing with me more? Is that what you're saying?
I guess that's what I'm saying.
Myself. Oh.
I guess that's what I'm saying. So, okay, we want to leave you with a radically rational thought. And yeah, I'm kind of a NASA enthusiast. I'm kind of a space history enthusiast. One of the smartest things I've ever heard in the midst of this crisis came out of the mouth a couple of days ago of former U.S. astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a lot of time aboard the International Space Station.
Yeah.
And he said, especially toward the end of my time at NASA, I realized that not everything is rocket science. But you know what? When it's rocket science, you need to listen to the rocket science.
Right?
I don't think we could put a better bow on this one than that. So
Nice.
again, all be safe.
Yep.
Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Truly, the only path out of this is us figuratively holding hands and marching while we are standing at least 6 feet apart.
Feet apart.
So, all right, thank you for putting the social back in social distancing.
Back at you, Paul. And Joe.
Yay.
Joe says hey, and Frankie says hey.
Frankie.
And our thanks to Ben Campos, and our thanks to Smoking Hot Next Door Neighbor, and our thanks especially to Lori's dear friend in New York State. All thoughts and prayers with
Yes.
her.
Always.
Lori, I'll probably talk to you before the day's over. So
Okay.
again, I want to let you know that this is available. Well, if you're seeing this, you know this, but it's available starting Wednesday, today at 5 p.m. We're also going to edit a whiz-bang video version of this. That will be available tomorrow. It'll be on our Facebook page and also on YouTube. Lori, I like the t-shirt. You haven't referenced mine, dadgummit.
Can't
This
see
was on
yours.
purpose.
What's he say? Can't see
It
it. Oh,
says, feeling stronger
longer
every day.
every day.
Words to live by. Lori, thank you so much. Thank all of you. We will see you soon on Radically Rational.